Hey everyone, and we are looks like we are live. Awesome. So, in these videos, we are gonna talk about the top network white paper. And since there's just so much to cover and there's just so many intricacies that deserve their own attention and their own section, what we're gonna do is that we're gonna break down the white paper reading into smaller episodes. So that way we'll be able to give each and every section the attention that it deserves, right? So first thing that you should do is open up the top white paper. You will find the link in the description box below. So when you open the white paper, the first thing that I want you to see is the abstract, so to speak, because that shows you why top network was created in the first place. Because let's face it, there are a lot of smart contract platforms and public blockchain platforms out there. We have your Ethereum, EOS, Tron, etc., etc. So why did we need top network? Like, weren't they enough? The answer to that question, well, if you have watched the first top class video where we talked about the evolution of the blockchain space from 2008 to where we are at right now with fourth generation blockchains, the answer will be there. So the reason why we needed something like top was because we wanted to create a system that is not only scalable and does not only provide the underlying technologies for developers to build the dApps that they really want to build, but what it also does is that it provides a user base so that when somebody is creating an application, there are people that are actually out there who want to use it, right? That's the core philosophy. And uh, if you look into the history of the blockchain space, so 2008 we had Bitcoin when Satoshi Nakamoto, we don't know who that person is, but somebody created this amazing protocol for decentralized peer-to-peer payment, and the technology that was underlying it and that was like tying it all together was the blockchain technology, right? And eventually, all these platforms came about, like Ethereum, EOS, etc., who wanted to expand the use case of blockchains to include your application and stuff like that. Because if you think about it, what the blockchain does is it allows you to leverage decentralization to the extent where, if executed properly, you can create like a decentralized social media where you have the freedom to express your views the way you want without big brother overseeing you and telling you what to do. And that the concept in itself is amazing, right? But if you if we were to be honest about how the space has gone on so far, we have the creation of Bitcoin, then we had Ethereum and all these smart contract platforms. But after that, we have sort of plateaued. The reason why we are plateaued is that we know what the problem is. We need good scalability. We need strong user bases. And because of that, the technological aspect of this space has not been able to fulfill its potential so far. So that is why we needed to create something like Top Network, which champions the core ideals of fourth gen blockchain platforms, scalability, along with the user base, right? So if we now look into the core structure of Top Network, the overview of the entire of our entire platform can be segmented into three layers. The first layer is the application layer, the overlying on top, the layer that's on top is the application layer. Below it is a service layer, and right underneath it, where all the good stuff happens, is the infrastructure layer. So I know that in the white paper we talk about the infra layer first, and then we go into the service layers and the application layers. But we are going to flip the script around. We're going to talk about the application layer and the service layer first. So if you're going through the white paper, that's section number 6 and 5 respectively. So scroll all the way down. And the reason why we are doing that, well, there is a lot to cover in the infrastructure layer. There is so much to cover because the amount of details and amount of intricacies that we involve in that layer, it we will need separate videos to define that. So I thought it will be a lot easier for us to go through the application, the service layer first, before we go into the infra layer. So I hope you're fine with that, right? So just scroll down, come to section number 6, that's the application layer. It's just above the conclusion part. So what is the application layer? You can think of it as the user facing layer, right? I mean, that's the layer that the users will interact with while interacting with top network as a whole. And as I have already told you before, one of the worst kept secrets in the blockchain space is the lack of users in applications. And why that's important? Well, think about it for a second. Suppose you're creating a social media network, right? And you only have 3 users. Are you going to completely maximize the potential of what your network could possibly do? No, right? The reason being that if you only have 3 or 4 people, then you're not maximizing the full network potential of what you can potentially offer. But if you have around 200, 300 users in your social media network, you're still doing better. 1,000 users, imagine the amount of interactions that you can make throughout the platform. And eventually, as the number of users increases, the overall social network value of the entire platform increases. It's called the Metcalfes Law, and it's a really fascinating read. So read up on it some other time. So the reason why we need a certain amount of users is that for our business logic, the business logic of our application, for it to achieve something, for it to reach a particular critical mass, we need users. And the way the blockchain space is right now is that there are not a lot of users. And even if we do get some users, the quality of applications that are out there are not really good enough to sustain that user base, right? So what this creates is this weird little catch-22 where you don't have the applications that can bring in the users, and at the same time, if the users do want to, if there are no users in the platform, the developers are not going to create the application, right? So it's this loop of like inefficiency and broken dreams, so to speak. So that is where we are at right now. And what Top Network does is that it solves the user base quandary with a very simple method. The entire Top Network ecosystem, it's broken into 2 parts. We have the Top Network blockchain, we have the Top Cloud ecosystem, right? In the cloud ecosystem, we already have 3 apps: CoverMe, Dingtone, SkyVPN. And these 3 apps in total have around 100 million users. 100 million users. And what we are going to do is that during launch, we are going to stage by stage migrate these users to our blockchain platform. When that happens, we are going to create a public chain that will have more than 100 million users. And we are going to be the only public chain in the world to boast that user base. And that, in essence, is pretty damn amazing. So think of it as a user, from a user point of view, from a developer point of view rather, you will have ready access to our underlying developer infrastructure and developer frameworks, which we're going to talk about in the service layer. And you're going to have access to so many users to actually use your applications. And that is where we have a huge advantage over the people, over other projects in the space. Now, speaking about the dApps that are going to be in our ecosystem, is that first of all, we have the utility dApps, then we have the in-house dApps, and then we have the third-party dApps. Utility dApps are simple dApps that facilitate the growth and operational capabilities of our ecosystem by bringing in some much needed utility. A very good example of this is our Hi Wallet. So you can check out our wallet at hiwallet.org. And it's a decentralized wallet that can also act as an exchange. And it also acts as an entry point for all the other applications in the top network space, right? So you can sort of use the wallet and use all the gain entry into all the interesting applications that are in our ecosystem. So that's an example of a utility DApp. And while the top team created the high wallet DApp, it will be open for anybody to create. For example, only top developers, in-house top developers will not be gaining full monopoly over utility dApps. Other people will also have the ability to do so. The second class of dApps are the in-house dApps. Now, this, as we have already mentioned, currently the blockchain space, the amount of developers that are actually out there trying to create something and the amount of platforms that are already out there is very heavily skewed, because we don't have a lot of developers who want to create applications for these platforms. So what we are going to do is that in the beginning stages, Top Network is going to adopt a closed loop ecosystem approach, wherein only people, our in-house developers, will be able to create dApps and build the basic framework, so to speak. The reason why we are doing that is that we just we don't want to like hope and pray that somebody else is going to actually use our platform, right? We want to create the basic ecosystem where people can then come on and then build on top of it. So it's not just like a desert, so to speak. Like, we have proper applications and utility inside the ecosystem. And the third type of dApps are the third-party dApps. So eventually, when our ecosystem matures and reaches a particular stage, and after we have ported all these millions of users onto our platform, we are going to open the gates for third-party developers to create their own applications. So after that, the Top Network ecosystem is going to grow on its own organically, right? Now, that is the application layer in a nutshell. And up next, we have the service layer. So service layer is where we provide the smart contracts and the different developer frameworks for our developers to actually create this application. One second, please. So in the service layer, think of it like this. Like, your applications are like for example, your bikes, so to speak. And in the service layer, we'll provide you with the engines, the wheels, and the frameworks so that you can create your own bikes, right? And that's a very crude way of putting it, but it is what it is. Now, in the service layer, Top provides multiple types of smart contracts. Well, it provides two kinds of smart contracts. We have the platform smart contracts, and we have the application level smart contract. And the platform smart contract will work on the Top main chain, while the application level smart contracts will work on the service chain that are running parallel to the main chain. The reason why we are doing that is because, do you guys remember the CryptoKitties fiasco? Like, what happened with the entire CryptoKitties thing? So Ethereum had this amazing dApp, right? This dApp which had a lot of potential, but it was way too successful for its own good, because eventually the total number of users that CryptoKitties attracted into the Ethereum platform, right? It was so huge that it ended up clogging up the Ethereum blockchain. And the blockchain bloat that resulted was so bad that transactions began getting, it was queued up for a longer period of time. Different ICOs and applications had to postpone their launch because they did not want the business system to clash, right? They did not want to get in for some unnecessary inefficiency during the launch because of the blockchain bloat. And to prevent that from happening, we are using a segregated system wherein the actual applications which require complex business logic will have their own side chain called the service chains, which will run in parallel to the main chain. So while your platform smart contract will deal with your normal asset transfer, elections, on-chain governance, etc., they will also be non-Turing compatible, non-Turing complete, because we don't want any inefficiencies during the running of the contract. But the application level smart contract, they will be able to execute complex business logic and run on the side of the main chain. So currently, for application level smart contracts, we are only supporting the Lua language, but we're eventually going to add more WebAssembly based frameworks like your Rust, JavaScript, etc. Because we want to give our developers as much flexibility as possible to run the contract, to run their own style of smart contracts, right? We don't want to pigeonhole into learning a specific language and running your logic based on that language, because we don't think that would be fair for you guys. So moving on, now that we have talked about the different kind of languages that will be open to the developers, let's look into the frameworks, so to speak. Uh, to understand what a developer framework is, like uh, it's a different kind. Since we want more developers to create on a platform, we want to provide them with a certain level of abstraction so that they don't need to deal with the low level complicated logic, and just deal with the overlaying logic and create the system that they want to create. So think about it like this. So what is abstraction? Like if you're running your car, right, you just plug in the key, you turn it, and there you go. You don't need to understand how the engine works or how the petrol combusts and like lets you go. You don't need to worry about all that. That is like an abstraction that you need to deal with on a daily basis. And the same logic can be applied here. We don't want the developers to deal with complicated, complex logic. We just want them to create. We just want them to translate what they have in their imagination and build that on top of the platform. So these frameworks will allow you to do so. And most of our frameworks, like the main frameworks, have they are in the decentralized cloud communication space, because that is sort of like our main thing, right? Top networks main agenda, or the main aim lies in making a huge in being the go-to decentralized cloud platform in the world, like communication platform in the world. So we have like a lot of interesting services. So if you go to that section in the white paper, I'll tell you right now, that's 5.2.1.1, that's page number 33 or 36. We give a lot of rich communication services like your one-to-one chat, group chat, internet call, video call, walkie-talkie, content sharing, etc. And the idea here is that you as a developer, you can use the RCS service to create your own communication app. And these communication apps that you can create using our RCS service are inherently interoperable with each other. The main problem with the communication apps that we use in the real world, like for example your WhatsApp, Telegram, WeChat, is that they're not interoperable. They are information silos of their own. So if I am a WhatsApp user, I can't contact a WeChat user. A WeChat user can't contact a Telegram user, and a Telegram user can't contact a Skype user. We have all these different uh, like platforms for no reason, right? Which are just taking up space in our phone. But any communication app that you create using the RCS service, they will all be able to communicate with each other. So you won't be forced to download all these different apps just to be in touch with all your friends, right? You can just use one app and that's it. So I think that's a pretty interesting use case that comes out of here. And looking into the rest of the services, we have our proxy service, of course. Top proxy service provides the proxy overlay network for users to connect to the internet. And the proxy overlay network on top consists of a proxy server group and a relay server group. And any individual servers that use our network can be used both as a proxy or a relay server. So if you go through the details, you will know how a user can interact with that. It's just very surface information, so we don't need to go further there. And top streaming service will allow all the applications in our top network to stream videos and stream live videos using our P2P decentralized content distribution network, or a CDN. Now, if you are not aware of how a CDN works, it's think of it as a relay system, right? For example, if you want to interact with a particular website, you need to go through this relay of servers, and this to interact with them and for them to reply back to you. And this entire thing is known as a CDN. Now, in a centralized system, these CDNs can be extremely expensive to maintain, right? Because you have your own individual server, and they have their own maintenance costs, and they need a staff to take care of that. But you negate that in a decentralized network like Top, because you're, instead of using servers, you're using the individual nodes in the network to act as a relay for the content to go from the source to you, the requester, right? So as such, our CDN service is going to be significantly less cheaper than what you have to deal with in real life. Along with that, we also have the IoT service, wherein all the different IoT devices on top can easily communicate with each other, can easily interact, interconnect, and we have created that entire decentralized space for them to easily interact with each other without having to go through all that centralized headache that they usually have to go through. Also, when it comes to voice over IP services, like I'm pretty sure you guys are all aware how VoIP is usually a lot more expensive than in normal calling services. And the reason for that being that since VoIP has to go through intermediaries and middlemen, you have to give these middlemen a lot of money, like your intermediary fees, so to speak. But since in a decentralized network, there are no centralized entities, and you can directly connect with the person that you want to speak, and you can completely negate these middlemen, right? That's one of the beauties of a blockchain system. So that is why the top VoIP service will be a lot cheaper than what your standard VoIP service is. So the last thing that we mentioned here is blockchain gaming. And if you're not aware, Top already has a lot of interesting blockchain games. You can just go to our website and check them out. It's pretty damn interesting. And developers will be creating their own games going forward. So that's another thing to definitely look forward to. So anyway, we have completed the application, the service layer section. Up next, we have the infrastructure layer. So what I'm going to do is, for the interest of time, we are just going to give a small preview as to what we're going to cover in the subsequent episodes. So the infrastructure layer in Top is further divided into 3 layers. As you can see, we love the number 3. Everything is 3 layers. So we have layer 0, layer 1, and layer 2. And we have projects around the world currently are either just solely working on layer 1 scalability techniques or layer 2 scalability techniques. We believe that to achieve true scalability, it's important to have all these layers work in conjunction with each other and for them to scale up organically, right? So we are going to focus on layer 1, layer 2, as well as the layer 0 itself. And there are so many things to talk about in the infra layer. For example, your pluggable service chains, your layer 2 scalability, your one-way state channels, your service chains, your POS and PBFT, that's proof of stake and practical Byzantine fault tolerance consensus mechanism to Top users. And obviously, the cherry on top are Genosequa, the horizontal scaling capabilities that we get with full state sharding. There's just so much more to talk about, and we're going to do that very thoroughly in subsequent videos. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments. We're going to compile them and answer them in a separate video. In the meantime, I do hope this was valuable to you, because you need to go through the white paper on your own, obviously. But I hope that you can use this video as a frame of reference to understand what we are talking about, because there are a lot of intricacies. We understand that. So use this video as a reference, right? And be on the lookout for future videos. We're going to promote it throughout our social media. So if you want to join a Telegram channel, the link is in the description box below. Be on the lookout for future videos. Also be on the lookout for future Top classes, where we are going to talk about this concepts that we are going to discuss in the white paper discussion, but we're going to go a little bit deeper in those videos, right? Because we're going to talk about those individually. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you gained a lot of knowledge. And if you have any queries, feel free to ask. Yeah. Bye.